Okay, it's just going to be a quick live rant, I guess. Uh, it's been a while since I've been on here. Basically, what I want to talk about is authority. I'm a bit annoyed, I have to admit. I got up early to go to one of my favorite churches here in Montreal. I don't think I'm going to name it. But it was supposed to be month 4 of my first 5 Saturdays devotion. I've been trying to do this for years, and I always get partway through and something goes wrong. So yet again, it went wrong. I'm gonna make a concerted effort in the spring to complete the 5 first Saturdays devotion. If God willing, I live that long. I can't see why I wouldn't live that long. I'm young and healthy. I'm 51 years old. But you never know what's going to happen. And but I've been trying to do this for a long time. And it's just annoying. And so what happened is I got up early and I checked the website of the church to verify mass times, confession times, and got on my bike and I biked for 45 minutes in the freezing cold and up a steep hill to get to the church. And I was told you can't come in because you don't have a vaccine passport. So I actually knew that this church had just begun as of last week dividing up masses, segregating people into vaxxed and unvaxxed. Okay. So I knew that. I knew that this morning because I looked at the website and it told me that because Advent is a particularly busy time of year, they're going to limit the number of people by imposing the vaccine mandate, the vaccine passport policy. So, whatever, I was mildly annoyed, but I thought, okay, it's all right, I'll just go to the masses for the unvaccinated. But I, through my own fault, made a mistake interpreting the schedule. I just wasn't paying too close of attention. I showed up the wrong time, and I was asked to present my vaccine passport, which I don't have because I'm not vaccinated. And so I just started talking to the lady at the front desk, and there are a couple of them there, and explaining that I am Catholic and that I'm here at a Catholic church to pray and to avail myself of the sacraments. And she said, well, unfortunately, there's a rule where if you show up at this time of day, you're not allowed in unless you have the passport. So I explained to her that I had phoned the office of the Archbishop of Montreal, Christian Lapin. And I also phoned to speak with the secretary of the auxiliary, one of the auxiliary bishops of Montreal, Thomas Dowd. He's an Anglophone. And both phone calls reassured me that there would be absolutely no situation in the future where I would be deprived or denied access, refused access into any Catholic church during normal opening hours. And that they assured me that I would be able to have access to the church for prayer and the sacraments, provided that I met the usual conditions of entry into a church. Can't go in naked, can't go in drunk or high on drugs or with a machete or AK-15 or anything like that, obviously. But provided I go in as I normally have been in the habit of going to church, fully dressed and in my right mind and sober, then I would be allowed in. I was reassured by the Archbishop and by the Auxiliary Bishop that I would never, ever, in the province of Quebec, be denied access to the church during its normal operating hours. I could not be discriminated against based on my vaccine status. That I could not be turned away at the door because of my vaccine status. That this would never happen in the province of Quebec. That it would never happen. It's not going to happen. But it happened. So I raised a little bit of a stink. I said, look, I'm Catholic. Spoken to the bishop. He assured me that this would never happen. And I'm just here to pray. I'm just here to pray and to avail myself in a worthy manner of the sacraments. And furthermore, I am on month 4 of a 5-month devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary, and I'd like to come in now because I can't come back later. Because later in the day there was a slot for the unvaccinated. I explained that I biked for 45 minutes and that I just want to come in and pray and go to confession, go to Mass, say some more prayers, meditate for 15 minutes on the mysteries, and possibly say my rosary in the church too. I like to do that when I do my first Saturday devotions. So I was planning on staying a little bit longer and praying the rosary, because I like to do it on my knees in the church in front of the Blessed Sacrament. That's the best way to do it. So I explained all this, and I explained that I was assured by the office of the Auxiliary Bishop and by the Archbishop himself that I would never be denied the sacraments, and can you please just let me in and make an exception? I know this is the current rule that you guys have adopted here, but they refused to let me in. So I spoke with the security guards, or 2 security guards who came and were kind of took me off to the side and were trying to reason with me. And when I told them that the bishop had promised me that I would never be denied access based on vaccination status, one of the security guards said, well, have you never read in the Bible how we Catholics are supposed to submit to civil authority? Which I found a bit odd, because although we are supposed to submit to civil authority, the church is not subject to civil authority. The church is not beneath civil authority. So the bishop is not beneath the Premier of Quebec, right? It's the Premier of Quebec that's giving these directives, these policies, I guess you could call them. And I was assured by the bishop that those policies would not prevent me from having access to prayer and the sacraments in the Catholic churches of the province of Quebec, including Montreal, of course. So this point about submitting to civil authority, it is valid, but it's misapplied in this case, because the highest authority in the Archdiocese of Montreal is the bishop, and I was reassured by him that I would always have access. I would never be turned away because of vaccination status. And I tried explaining this to him, and he just said, you're going to have to leave or I'm going to phone the cops. So I said, okay, phone the cops. So he phoned the cops. I mean, I tried to get above him in the hierarchy. I said, what is your authority based on? Who is above you in the hierarchy? And he said, the administration of this church, which I don't want to name. But I think you can gather it's a fairly big church. So he said that he refused to escalate it and to allow me to talk to a priest or to talk to any of the administrators, who are all priests, by the way. And I know many of them because I frequent this church, and I have been frequenting this church for years, so I know many of them by face, some of them by name. So I just wanted to speak to someone. I'm a Catholic. I'm here to pray and to avail myself of the sacraments. Can we make this happen? Obviously not a big emergency, but I think it's reasonable to be granted access to quietly go about my business for an hour or two, right? In any case, the security guards called the police. The police came. They were already there because the police anticipated that there would be some resistance or some frustration probably with this new policy of limiting access to the vaccinated only during certain hours. You know, I do appreciate that there are hours allotted to the unvaccinated. I do appreciate that. I'm very grateful for that. And so it's not a complete nightmare situation. I don't need to go find an underground Catholic church that will allow me to have access to the sacraments. It hasn't reached that point yet in Quebec. And there was a church out east in one of the Atlantic provinces that suggested vaccinated only for their diocese, and that was overturned by the bishop of that diocese almost immediately because of the backlash, and common sense prevailed. So there are little hints here and there in Eastern Canada of some administrators wanting to lean that way towards the vax mandate, the vax passport policy for access to the sacraments. So in any case, there were police situated outside and they came in. So now I have 2 security guards and 3 police officers, all 5 of them in uniform, and I'm still in the sort of foyer or the entranceway to the church, and people are dripping in, showing their smartphones, so-called smartphones, and entering in into the church. So the friendly police officer who took the lead, there were 2 men and a woman. The one man, a large black man, I'm not sure what the politically correct word is. I mean, nice, friendly guy. He just wanted to know what's going on. And I just explained to him the same thing that I'd just been explaining to the security guard for 10 minutes. Namely, that I'm here to pray, I'm here to avail myself of the sacraments, and it's not convenient for me to come back 7 hours later. It's just not convenient for me. My schedule just doesn't work for me, and I've got a 3-month investment in this 5-month program that I'm working on, and I don't have a plan B, you know. So, I mean, they just kept telling me, well, you can go to a different church and you can come back later and you could do this and you can do that. And I would always come back with the same point, which was the question of authority. Well, what authority do you have to prevent me from praying in this church and from availing myself of the sacraments in this church? What authority do you have? Where does that authority come from? The policeman said his authority comes from the state. And I explained to him that in religion, monotheistic religion, we have God, and underneath, in the Catholic religion, underneath God in the hierarchy, we have the Pope, and then we have the bishops. And I have the word of the bishop that I will not be turned away. Right? So this is not a civil issue. This is a religious issue. It is the religious hierarchy that we need to examine here to sort out these policies. Are they Catholic policies in union with the teaching and directives and pastoral care of the bishop? Or are they anti-Catholic policies that are preventing Catholics, such as myself, from exercising our rights? And we do have rights as Catholics, right? Anyway, needless to say, these police officers were not interested in hearing about the hierarchy or sorting out the chain of command. They were not interested in that. They just said, you can leave now, or we're going to remove you, and if you resist, then you're in big trouble. Right? And I asked, why would I be removed? Why would I be removed? And they just kept emphasizing it because of the policy of this establishment. And I do understand. I mean, it is the case that that establishment has a policy in place, but it happens to be in contradiction to what I was told by not only the Archbishop of Montreal, but the auxiliary bishop too. I phoned a second bishop. He's only an auxiliary bishop, but I just wanted to get that reassurance. This was months ago. Perhaps the bishops have changed their minds. Perhaps my information that I got, the reassurance that I got, is out of date. It's no longer meaningful because they've moved on. They've caved to the pressure. They've changed their mind. They're willing to have policies creep in ever so slowly that would segregate the vaccinated from the unvaccinated. I mentioned in passing to the I don't know, it was to the cops or to the security guards, I can't remember which now, but I just mentioned in passing, if all these people here, I said, is everyone here in this big church, is everyone here today at this time vaccinated? And they assured me that yes, everyone here, everyone around us is vaccinated. And so I asked, so what is the problem? Just let me in. Because they're all safe, they're all protected, they're all vaccinated, right? It's safe and effective. It is safe and effective, right? So what is the problem? I know it's an exception to the policy that was made by this establishment. I know that. But the letter of the law kills, the spirit gives life, right? I have to admit I'm a little bit depressed because of this, but I'll get over it. It's not a big deal. I was listening the other day to a wonderful Canadian priest who is in Ottawa, Ontario, the capital, the nation's capital, and he was talking about the New World Order and how we can't cave to their worldly demands. And he gave a wonderful example. I know this priest's name. I'm just struggling now to remember it out of context. Father Mark Goring. Is that right? Father Mark Goring. Forgive me if I got that wrong, but I think that's who he is. He gave an example, a very touching example of how Catholics who follow civil authorities mindlessly can end up in some pretty sticky situations. And the example he gave was Rwanda, the genocide in Rwanda many years ago. I was alive. I remember it made a splash in the news, a big enough splash that it made it onto my radar. My radar is tuned so low that only the biggest items appear on my radar. That was the case even before I became a Catholic. But this tragedy in Rwanda between these two warring tribes got on my radar, and Father Mark gave a touching example of how a religious woman, a nun, Catholic, in her convent, followed the instructions that came through the mainstream media, her radio, TV, and whatever it was, newspapers, whatever the communication of the day was in Rwanda. She got the message over a period of days telling her to kill the members of this other tribe, right? Those of you who follow world events will know what I'm talking about, these two tribes, and the one prepared arms to slaughter the other at an opportune moment when I think the government fell because of some airplane crash or something like that. I don't know the details. I've never been too swift when it comes to current events, but you can go and look up the story for the background. But the point here is that this Catholic nun killed her religious sister because that was the policy. That was the policy of the government, right? Of this tribe that she happened to belong to that became dominant because of the circumstances, this precarious, tense situation, right? But she belonged to that tribe, and she was told by the mainstream media and by her civil authorities to kill mercilessly, just like in the Old Testament we read stories about this. Kill without mercy, women, children, men of all ages, right? Slaughter the animals. It's very Old Testament, and she fell for it, and she killed her sister. And so Father Mark Goring used this to illustrate the current situation and the dangers of the current situation, where Catholics, ostensible Catholics, are following blindly, some of them, following blindly, some of them, many of them maybe, following blindly the policies and directives, and I'm using this term sarcastically, but the pastoral care of the civil authorities. It's not a joke, it's not funny, it's very, very serious, it's very, very dangerous when we, who are supposed to be in the world but not of the world, are instruments, not of Christ, but instruments of Satan. And we implement the policies of Satan. When we implement worldly policies in the church, in our own practices, in our own lives, in our own church, that we are the administrators of this church, and we implement the policies of Satan. And it's not the first time I've seen evidence of this. It's rampant in Canada. It's rampant. I'm not here to bash the Catholic Church in Canada, but I've seen, since my conversion and since before my conversion, I've seen how the church is worldly. The members of the church, some of the members of the church, many of the members of the church seem to be very, very worldly. And I'm not above them. I'm not superior to them. I'm concerned about my own weakness, my own worldliness, my own penchant for Satan and his wily ways. I'm weaker than all the rest combined. I'm not raising myself up here. Not for a moment. I know myself. I know how weak and easily tempted I am. Okay? So I'm not putting anyone down. I'm just saying that it's not the way of Christ. It's not if you look at my life, you're going to see that I'm not doing it right. And if you look at some of these policymakers in the church, you'll see that in other ways, they are not doing it right. They're not following the way of Christ in this particular aspect or that particular aspect. Just like in my life, I have certain weak spots where I am not following Christ. Obviously, we all fall short. But the reason I'm putting energy into this rant is because it has great implications. My little world and my little weaknesses are putting my eternal salvation in jeopardy, right? But my sins day to day, they don't contaminate too much. They don't spill over too much, I would say. I would hope. Because most of it just takes place in my mind. It's temptations in terms of thoughts and imagination and not having custody of the eyes and these sorts of things. And the worst that can happen is I'll have nocturnal emission or something. So it's not really affecting a lot of people's eternal salvation. But if you're a policymaker in a church and you're turning away people who have been coming loyally all throughout the year to your establishment to avail themselves of prayer and the sacraments, and they've been financially supporting you with the tithes and with the almsgiving, and they've been a loyal son, and you decide you're going to turn them away. Why? Not for health reasons. No, I was assured of that by everyone involved, by the security guards and by the police. I was assured, listen, you're not being turned away because of your vaccination status. This is just a way of it's just a policy to limit the numbers of people that are coming here, because during Advent and Christmas time, we get a lot of people coming here, and so it's just a policy to limit the numbers. Well, it's a policy that favors lukewarm Catholics and that favors spectators and tourists. Okay, and I've got nothing against letting those people in. Let them come and see what they're missing. The Catholics who are Catholic in name only, who come on Christmas or during the Christmas season and on Easter or during Lent, those Catholics who haven't been to confession in decades, and they only come physically into the church at Christmas and Easter and maybe some marriages and funerals and baptisms, these sorts of things. These cultural Catholics, I wish them well. I hope they come and get inspired to meet at least the minimum requirements that the church obliges them to meet if they want to call themselves Catholic. I hope that I encourage them. I wish them well. I hope they will get inspired when they come to church. But I don't understand why I'm being turned away when I've been a faithful son of the church. Not a perfectly faithful son. I'm in desperate need of the sacrament of confession. Not right now because I confessed last week. But I'm in desperate need generally of salvation, of Christ and his church. I'm in desperate need of that, or I will end up in hell. So I wonder how these people would feel if they turned away someone who wanted to get in the state of grace. They were turned away and they remain in the state of mortal sin, and then, God forbid, they get hit by a truck or they have a heart attack or whatever before they can be reconciled. I know there's that baptism of desire, and there's probably also a reconciliation of desire. I believe in that. I do believe in that. So I'm not terribly worried about it. But it's just the idea that church administrators will be turning away those of us who are sincerely striving to get right with God before death. And just welcoming in sodomites, adulterers. And again, I'm not raising myself above these people. I'm just saying, I know people, I know the kinds of Catholics who go to church at Christmas and Easter only, and who adore the architecture and the organ music, and they enjoy all the cultural stuff, but they don't believe in God. They don't believe obviously in Jesus Christ or the Incarnation or the virgin birth or anything else. I know many people who call themselves Catholic who are in a damnable state, permanent state of mortal sin because of their lifestyle and their perseverance in sin. I'm not saying I'm better than I'm just saying that I'm striving. I'm striving to get right with God. I'm striving to avail myself in a worthy manner of prayer and the sacraments. And I did not expect to be turned away today. Maybe that's what I deserve, and I'll just take it as a penance. That's what I deserve. But there's the underlying issue, the bigger picture here of authority. Where is the authority? When I was arguing with the cops, they could only see the civil authority. That's all that's on their radar. And I asked him, well, if you have authority, I said, sir, do you have authority? And he said, yes, I do. It's given to me by the state. And I said, well, then walk me over to the counter and use that authority to make her give me an exception so I could just go in. Because all I'm going to do is quietly pray and avail myself of confession, and I'm going to go to Mass. He said, sorry, sir, I can't do that. So and then when I was speaking with the security, they're Catholic, they kept referring me to the same issue. This is the policy. This is the policy that was decided upon by this church, this particular place here. Again, I don't want to name it, but there seems to be a complete lack of understanding of the hierarchy. The priests who decided that, they're not superior to the Archbishop of Montreal. They are inferior. They're subordinate in that hierarchy, right? Now, the security guard made a good point. Well, obviously, if the policy has been implemented here by the priests here, obviously they couldn't do that without the authority of the bishop. That's a good point. So that means there are basically two possibilities of what I experienced today. The first possibility is that the bishop isn't communicating properly that people should not be turned away based on their vaccination status. Because when he assured me that I would never be refused the sacraments, I would never be turned away, he meant it, but he didn't implement it. That's one possibility. The other possibility is he didn't really mean it. Or he changed his mind. Or he caved to the pressure. I don't know. I don't know which way reality went, because it's months ago now that I got this reassurance from my bishop. Months ago. A lot can change in one day, and much less a few months. So I don't know what happened. I really don't know what happened. My hunch, if I had to guess, my hunch is that at the time the bishop could not imagine that anyone would ever be denied entry into a church in his archdiocese. He could not imagine that that would ever come about. And so he just reassured me based on his naive presupposition that that's unrealistic. It's not going to happen. Don't worry. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. Oops. Okay, it's happening. That's what I think happened. Right? And then the pressure from the civil authorities, and it's like you have to play ball and you have to cooperate. Okay, we'll implement a policy. We'll allow churches to have a policy where they can have hours for the vaxxed, hours for the unvaxxed, and we'll have sort of a segregated faithful. Okay? So probably that's what happened. The bishop just caved to those pressures, and not a big deal. Everyone can still avail themselves of the sacraments. You just have to go in your little lane. Stay in your lane. and everything will be fine. And it's not every church that's doing that. In fact, I think this is, I've heard rumors of others. So this is the first one I've encountered that is actually implementing this policy of segregation. Anyway, I'm a bit disappointed. I'm going to start again in the spring. Maybe I'll do March, April, May, June, July, or I'll do April, May, June, July, August, or May, June, July, August, September, something like that. Because I do want to get this accomplished once and for all. I've started so many times and I've always failed. And like I said, I probably deserve what I get, right? I'm no saint, so I deserve obstacles. I deserve to be turned away. I deserve to be spat upon. I wasn't spat upon today. I was just turned away. So I'm not getting the rough treatment that I deserve. I mean, I deserve to be burning in hell for all eternity, and I'm getting yet another chance to get right with God and to hopefully not end up in hell. So I'm very, very grateful to Christ and his church. I'm not blaming the weak members of the church that are implementing Satan's policies. I'm not blaming them. I think it's perfectly natural and normal to cave to pressure because we don't like pressure. We don't like peer pressure. We don't like displeasing our fellow man, right? Losing the respect of our fellow man. So I basically was walked out. The police officer said, look, he said, I'm not interested in hearing about the hierarchy of the church. This is the policy here. You have to leave. If you don't leave, we're going to forcibly take you out. And if you resist, you're in big trouble. So I just said, okay, well, let's go. But as we were walking out, I mean, this cop was big and I'm about 5'9" or something. I don't know. I'm 175 centimeters tall, whatever that is. And this big macho guy, he's not really macho. He's just, big and strong. But I kind of tapped him on his chest piece. He's got one of these Kevlar chest pieces on or whatever it is. The full gear. I don't know what it's made out of, plastic maybe. But I just kind of tapped him in the center of the chest. And I said, how would you feel? Tap, tap, tap. How would you feel if you had a religion that you cared about and you were turned away? I said, how would you feel about that? And he just said, take your hands off me. Don't touch me. And so, I mean, it was a sad and depressing day for me. It really was. I was not expecting that. When I woke up, I was all excited that I'm on my way to completing, finally. I will have done 4 of 5 first Saturdays. I was all excited. I was excited all week for this. Right? Now, I know it's not some superstitious vending machine magic trick, do the thing and you get the reward and all this sort of thing, but it's a gesture of love to Our Lady of Fatima. It's a gesture of love I've been trying to make to her, and I've been messing it up time after time. What I used to do, I used to mess it up because I would go on the first Saturday of the month, and in my excitement I would keep going back on the next Saturday instead of waiting a month and going, and then I would just get confused that way because of my excitement. And because these places where they offer the sort of guided first Saturday devotions, they're quite distant. So I would have to take a bus, and there's a big ordeal. And I would make it to the first time, the second time, and then I would end up messing up the schedule or just whatever. And it's such a hassle to get there. So I said, okay, I'll just do it on my own without a sort of group guiding me. And they do common prayers together and these sorts of things. But I said, I'll just try to do it on my own. And I've tried, and I've just failed. It's not that hard, right? It's not that hard, but I don't have, well, first of all, my transportation is limited, and during the pandemic now, obviously, it's very limited where I can find a priest that'll even do confession. It's not easy. If I don't go to this big touristy one, then I've basically got to make a rendezvous, make an appointment to go to confession. It's a real pain. It's a pain. It's very uncomfortable, not because I have to take the time to make an appointment, but because it's obviously a nuisance to the priest. It's not part of his routine. It's like these priests are not in the habit of doing confession of their flock. They're not in the habit. And so that's why I've been going to this big church. I won't name it, but it's big and it's touristy. And the thing I like about it, even though it's very, very left leaning and progressive, or whatever you want to call it, the thing I like about it is there's always a priest in the confessional. I can go and I can find a priest and I can do confession. Whereas at my parish, I have to phone, I have to make an appointment. It's a big deal. Not a big deal for me, but I know I'm aggravating the priest because he's not in the habit of doing it. I'm taking precious time away from him. I'm just that annoying guy that wants to take 15 minutes or half an hour out of his morning or whenever it is. And that 15 or 20 minutes is probably more like an hour when he has to juggle around all of his other things, because these priests they're not just taking care of one church, one parish, they're doing multiple parishes because the crisis that we have here in Quebec. They're run ragged and is just, they don't have time to do confession, and they're not in the habit because there's no demand. There's not a demand. I'm so encouraged when I go to the larger, what I would call commercial churches or touristy churches, because they have confession ongoing. You will go and you'll see lineups. You'll have to actually wait in line to get in the confessional. I love that. I feel more comfortable because I know that they're in the habit of doing it. And I'm not robbing them of precious time where they need to get over to the next parish or whatever it is, whatever their demands are made on these priests that are run ragged at the parish level. So these big commercial touristy churches are where I prefer to confess. But that explains why they're going to cater to the tourists. They're going to cater to the lukewarm Catholics who are Catholic in name only. Not to insult them, but that's where they're at right now. Hopefully, with the experience of coming to these touristy churches, they'll get the taste for Catholicism and they'll go back to more full participation, right? Keeping their Sunday obligation and going to confession at least once a year and these sorts of things. But there is a temptation to cater to the tourist and to the cultural Catholic at a lot of these bigger places. And of course, because they're bigger, they're getting faithful Catholics as well. I mean, people who I'm sure many of them are going to confession frequently and daily mass, all kinds of things. So there are all kinds of people at these large touristy churches. But the policy of having segregation, vaxxed and unvaxxed, I do think it's a dangerous road to go down. I do think it's dangerous for the church, and it's not going to, affect my faith. It's not going to make me want to rebel and jump ship and go somewhere else, right? But it does affect my relationship with this particular establishment where I had this particular experience. It does leave a bad taste in my mouth. Do they care? Not really. I'm just a nobody, right? Won't affect them. But how will that play out? How will that play out when it comes to my walk with God? How will that play out? Because, when I came into the church in 2009, I was aware of the corruption in the church. And that's what this is, by the way. The vax segregation is corruption. Make no mistake about it. It is corruption. It's caving to the world. There should be no segregation. This is ridiculous. I mean, I could have had AIDS, I could have had syphilis, I could have had all kinds of things. As long as I have that mRNA or whatever these things are that are approved by the state authorities, right? As long as I have that, come on in, right? Even if I have the placebo, even if I got the placebo, come on in. So it's a complete joke. But anyway, I think I've ranted long enough. I feel a little bit better, actually, because I don't have anyone to talk to about this. I mentioned it to my wife, and she just thinks my religion is a joke and that it's a satanic church full of pedophiles and criminals and whatever. So it's not satisfying to talk to her about it. And I don't want to get bitter about it. I mean, like I was just saying, I came into the church in 2009. I already knew that the church was corrupt, and I already knew from experience, like just the first few priests that I had talked to, you start to see the landscape. It's like, wow, it's very inconsistent. Okay, very inconsistent. And especially since I was asking a lot of questions when I was brand new Catholic, asking a lot of questions about stuff I'm excited about, right? Not getting the Catholic answers, just putting it out there. Bang, this is the beautiful church that I joined, and then getting back something different. That's challenging. That's challenging. It's been a challenge from day dot. There are good people in the church. Many, many, many good people in the church. Here in Montreal, here in Quebec, here in Canada, here in North America, and on planet Earth. Many, many, many good and faithful Catholics striving to be faithful. I don't know what the percentage is. I would probably guess a good solid 10 or 15% of Catholics are striving to be sincerely faithful. A good 10 or 15%. And in the clergy, I don't even want to guess, because it's a horrible thing to contemplate. Whatever number I put on it, it's not going to be pretty, right? It's not going to be pretty. I wouldn't even speculate, because I've just met a lot of priests who are claiming, anyway, to believe things that are anti-Catholic. So is it my interpretation of what they said? Or, I mean, like, I've met priests who think that just one moment here, my wife's just coming home. Like I was saying, I'm gonna wrap this up. My wife just got home. But as I was saying, I've met priests who deny the real presence. I've met priests who believe it's okay to masturbate. I've met priests, obviously, who believe in evolution. Right? That I can tolerate, because it's probably tolerated by the church to some extent. But in any case, I'm just letting you know that I've always known how the church is. The church is one. It's holy, it's Catholic, and it's apostolic. I know that, but I also know that it's populated by flawed humans who are prone to worldliness. I know that. I've always known that. So my primary concern is to just continue to strive against my own nature, my own fallen nature, which is so weak and so pathetic and disgusting. And I just like a little bit more help from those who are in the church here in Montreal. I just like a little bit more help with that. But I have all grace I need to be saved. I have sufficient grace to be saved. I know that too. So I can't blame anyone but myself. I can't take credit for anything. All of the credit I've given over to Christ through Mary. So that's it. I hope you have a great day, and hopefully I'll start back up on my reading of the Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma by Ludwig Ott. I've been taking a little break, as you know, but hopefully I'll be back. I don't think anyone listens to it anyway, but I do enjoy it for myself. And hopefully a couple of people will get turned on to this wonderful book and to dogmatic theology generally. So that's it for today. Thanks for listening to the rant, and we'll talk very soon. Take care of yourselves. God bless.